I have hit the button. Now let's see if this thing works. Not yet. Okay. It's running. Starting the intro. You're on.
All right. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the show. It is your favorite Jackson, the good Jackson. I know Gunter Bechly lying, that was never news. Well, sometimes we're a little behind the news, which for us here in the US is probably for the best. So joining me today is my host and co-host, Peter, of Gonna Go For It fame,
Hello.
with your tiny dinosaur.
Yeah, someone in the background will be going during the entire show because he wants attention. What?
Understandable.
Yes. It's what they do.
And then we also have one of my editors, Nestlig, is joining us. Welcome back.
Hello, good to be back. It's
Good to
been
have
2
you.
weeks since the last time.
Yeah, had some family stuff last week. Couldn't make the show.
Mhm.
So, here we are. We're back. Back and better than ever. He says that with all the deadpan. So, we were watching a Gunter Bechly video. Last time, as we mentioned there, Gunter Bechly has passed. Recently he had a car accident and died. And so we're just yes. Jake, insert clever dapper inside joke here. Nelson's he says hit like and then subscribe if you haven't already. So please do.
Yes.
But
I
anyway,
seem to
so
have shrunk.
you have shrunk. You're
Yes.
oh my gosh.
Let me growth in there. There we go. That's a little bit better.
I've actually so right now RJ and I are working on Rocks Volume 2, and we did a very long section in one of the chapters of Volume 2 where we gave Beckley a thrashing, him and Meyer. We went through a variety of their arguments related to the Cameron explosion, and Darwin's Doubt, which was Meyer's 2013 book, and so we go through all those. Now that Beckley has passed, I don't think that. I think the Discovery Institute is down a paleontologist now, so he was their in-house paleo entomologist. So he studied fossil insects specifically. Um, they had before him Casey Luskin doing fossil stuff because Meyer's more. I think Meyer's actually in charge of the Discovery Institute now. I think he's the one running it. And so I don't know who will be picking up the job of Beckley now. Not sure. And so we'll see. But anyway, so Beckley's kind of his big draw was that he was very quick on the draw in terms of writing papers about Precambrian and Cambrian organisms. He basically, as soon as a paper dropped, he would be on it and would be like, "Here's how it's not evidence for evolution." And he did that all the time. Oh my gosh, he wrote so many papers in a relatively short amount of time that he worked for.
Papers in quotation marks.
Right, he wrote blog posts. He just wrote blog posts. He wrote innumerable blog posts. And if you read one of his blog posts, you could see him. He's like cites himself dozens and dozens of times. There were so many. There were like, and so anyway, suffice to say, we went through a whole bunch of those in Rocks Volume 2. One of the, I think it was chapter 4. I think it was chapter 4. Um, so now I'm working on chapter 5. So we finished chapters 1 and 2. RJ's working on 3. We finished 4. I'm doing 5, and 5 has been largely about dinosaurs. So I've been writing a lot about feathered theropods because, of course, creationists can't have any feathered theropods. Um, so there's a Ken Ham chapter that's very funny. It's titled "What Happened to the Dinosaurs," and that is the one where he says that the average size of a dinosaur was that of a sheep because Michael Crichton's science fiction novel Jurassic Park says so. Yeah, that's a citation,
That's
right? That's how that works.
yeah, that's where you get your science from.
um,
I remember getting flagged by my high school teacher for citing Wikipedia.
mm,
But this is something else.
yes.
Yeah.
Um, so 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 Ham cited cited Jurassic Park. Well, technically he didn't cite Jurassic Park. He cited The Lost World, which is the second Jurassic Park book. But and there are some really good bits in his chapter that are like funny on another level because this chapter was written back in 2007, and of course Ham makes the argument that that non-avian dinosaurs could still be around. Maybe Mokele Mbembe is an actual sauropod. Maybe it's still around. I mean, sometimes animals we thought were extinct, we find populations of them, even though we thought they were extinct. That happens. You could cite like the coelacanth, the Wollemi pine, monoplacophorans. He didn't cite any of those. What he cited was much funnier. He cites a Carl Weiland post from 1995, I think it was, that argues a couple of Indian elephants in Nepal were mammoths, actually.
Hmm.
So there's that.
Mm,
They weren't, by the
yes.
way.
Well,
Um,
they are just missing the hair. That's it. They have like
oh,
a hair disease.
sorry, I just missed that. Uh, Gifted 5, silent tetrapod with a silent P. Gifted 5 Jackson Wheat memberships. Oh, thank you so much.
Nice.
Um, Very nice, thank you.
Is it like a pterosaur with 2 wings and 4 legs, or
Like
that?
our bat that we were looking at in
Yeah.
the Haranyaya video. Um, well, so the funny thing about these elephants is they're not super hairy or anything like that. They're just old male elephants, male Indian elephants. That's all. There's nothing unusual about them. In fact, Darren Naish, I found out, wrote a blog post about these particular elephants like years ago, and he points out that these just look like normal old bull elephants. That's all.
It's really funny. It reminds me of like like one response of creationists to the Neanderthals were that they were just old people, and now it seems that they are
Right.
making that that mistake with the elephant. That's really funny.
Yes. Yeah. Basically. Yeah. The funny thing was, I fully expected Ken Ham to, you know, give an example that was normal. Like he could have just cited the coelacanth, right? He didn't have to go off and talk about. um, he didn't have to talk about elephants that were thought to be mammoths. But anyway, that's Ken Ham for you. Um, Crown House says, I heard about these elephants. They had funny heads. Yeah, so their head becomes the head of Indian elephants as they become old, becomes kind of domed, and so it's kind of looks similar to like mammoth skulls because they have that domed head, but that's just kind of a common feature of older elephants in general.
It's a it also reminds me like how do you call it again? The shifts in developmental rate.
Heterochrony, yeah.
Yeah, heterochrony. Like it is maybe something like that. Like the
Probably
basically yeah.
because that's what happened with the Sicilian dwarf elephant. They have a really big brain case because they don't they don't go through the full um, transition in size. They don't grow to how big their genus like normally does, which I think is Paleoloxodon. I think because they get really big. Paleoloxodon gets really big, and so
Yeah,
the dwarf Paleoloxodon, they have these really big brain cases because as juveniles they have larger brain cases. They get kind of smaller over time as they get older. But yeah, so exactly right. Um, yes, Alex Markle says, yes, because old age gives you a barrel chest, robust bones, no chin, eyebrow ridge. True. And you know, it gives you that occipital bun. Yes, yes. So anyway. Okay, so we're gonna get through. I think we're gonna get through the Beckley video, and then once we do that, we have a different kind of video for the second one, so it should be interesting. So, all right, you guys ready to jump in?
Mm-hmm.
I was born ready, except
All
for the
right,
fact that I couldn't highlight the message because I forgot to put in a new key in my tiny tool here. So there we go.
Peter,
There's Alex Markel. Just a little
I'm
late.
sure it is a perfectly respectably sized tool.
Well, yes, but so I use this tool to highlight the messages in chat, and there's only one show where I have a different key because the host will also have the ability to, or wants the ability to highlight messages in chat, and that's the one that I did 2 days ago, which is the show with Natalia Reagan. If you're not subscribed, what's wrong with you? I mean, we're going to have a man who found something that is not evidence for evolution, Tiktaalik. So, Mr. Neil Shubin, April 2nd. Make a note.
That sounds fun.
Yes. Okay, so shall we jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, there we go.
There is a preceding event to the Cambrian explosion, the so-called Avalon explosion, where all those weird kind of Ediacaran organisms appear.
There's no audio?
I can't hear anything.
I had an update, a Windows update again. So
damn it, Bill Gates. Again.
Always kneecapping us.
I mean, for quite a while, every single time I get an update, it is messing with my audio settings, and I have no idea why.
Okay, so they outside have audio. We just don't necessarily gonna just.
Yes, the outside does have audio because I could hear it. But let me just make sure that everything works. Okay. So now it should work. Let's try it out.
Here, where no scientist really knows what they are, if they are animals or fungi or strange giant protists or something totally different. But they appear abruptly before the Cambrian explosion, and they have no relationship whatsoever to the later Cambrian organisms. So
okay, let's
no
pause for a second. I'm sorry.
10 seconds.
10 whole seconds. Okay, I know exactly what he's talking about because we just talked about this. If you guys haven't seen it, we literally just talked about this in the jellyfish's tail. So what he's talking about is Proarticulata, which is a phylum of these Ediacarans. So these are late Ediacaran organisms that are they're animals. They're not just organisms; they're animals. So there was this idea. So they were first discovered back in the 60s, I think it was, and nobody knew what the heck they were. Some they were initially proposed to be jellyfish. Some people propose them to be fungi or lichens. Some people propose them to be like giant protists. They're all sorts of different or other like ctenophores, whatever. So there's all sorts of different hypotheses for what these guys are because their diagnostic characters are rather few and far between. We can identify a couple things about them. For one thing, they have a diagnostically animal feature, which is the fact that they're made of units that start small and then grow in size and like change position on the animal. Sorry, off screen. They kind of change. They like move around. Uh, Only animals do that. There are no plants, fungi, protists that exhibit that sort of growth. That is diagnostically animal. Second, they have what's called glide symmetry. So the units that make them up, for most of them, are slightly offset from each other. So they're not perfectly bilaterally symmetric, but they are really close. However, some members of Proarticulata are bilaterally symmetric. So whether that means, and as of current, all members of Proarticulata, so Dickinsonia, Vindia, Yorgia, these guys are all considered a single monophyletic clade. Maybe they are. Maybe it's a paraphyletic assemblage. Who knows? That's where we are currently with our understanding of them. But as of current, these guys are basically seen as stem bilaterians for these reasons. So they have this almost left-right symmetry, and some of them do in fact have left-right symmetry. So this group is considered to be like sister to the bilaterians, the bilaterally symmetric animals, which includes like the acoelomate flatworms, the deuterostomes, so echinoderms, vertebrates, and then the protostomes, so arthropods, cephalopods, and all those guys. And so some of the arguments like that they're fungi or that these are under terrestrial environments, like these have just been kind of knocked down over the years. There's no really good evidence for it. It's really kind of just one guy who's been proposing that. His name is Gregory Redelac.
Yeah, you brought him up last time. I remember you saying that what was it again? He mistook something for something else.
Oh, he mistook a beehive
Oh
for
yeah,
like
beehive.
a Dickinsoniid. Yeah, pretty wacky. But anyway, I guess I can't talk. Who am I? I'm not a paleontologist. So he is, however, he is an expert on like paleosols, so on ancient sediments, ancient soils. That's kind of his wheelhouse is ancient soils. So he's written like literally the textbook on ancient soils. But when it comes to these ediacaran animals, he's very much the odd man out on their identification. But uh, most ediacaran paleontologists have since come around to their stem bilaterians. Like it is, and the same is true of the other kind of weird ediacarans. So things like the rangiomorphs and the ernietomorphs, these weird fractal and frondose organisms. These also are considered to be stem eumetazoans. So they're more derived than sponges, but probably less derived than uh, like jellyfish or comb jellies, for instance. And we will actually talk about them once we get to the sponge's tail, which is not the next tail, it's the next one. Nestle, you want to throw anything in there?
Well, I think you covered it pretty good. Like I would actually be curious if there's any improvement about their ecology. Like I remember when we did the video on the Cambrian explosions, like the two part, like the very very old videos of 2 parts. And I wrote down that the rangiomorphs, which were most likely osmotrophs, but I've seen recent papers that put that into question. Perhaps they were not absorbing organic matter from the ocean. Like they probably were like using these front patterns to respire, and they instead consumed the the organic from the microbial mats within which they were housed. Like I've seen other proposals like that. Like basically they absorb the nutrients from the microbial mats, and they use the front structure to respire oxygen, most likely, or maybe something else, a different oxidant like sulfate, something perhaps. It's also possible.
Okay, I haven't read, I haven't read that much about them yet. I was going to read about all those guys once we get to the Sponge's Tail. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Don't know. Yeah, I'm not up to date on all those guys. So
I think we are pretty sure that Dickinsonia fed directly on the microbial mats. Like we have these imprints on the microbial mats left behind. Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right. Which again would be another, like, if it's leaving feeding traces, it's going to be an animal. Yeah. So these guys. So when Bechly says there's no continuity between the Ediacaran organisms and the Cambrian ones, he's just wrong. There is continuity. These guys are the precursors to the later crown bilaterian groups that actually appeared later in the Ediacaran and then crossed over into the Cambrian, because we now have crown bilaterians in the Ediacaran, and even crown members of some phyla, bilaterian phyla in the Ediacaran. So, anyway, okay, we can keep going.
Between them, that you could say the Ediacaran fauna is the ancestor of the Cambrian fauna. You cannot even say Ediacaran fauna, the term is used, but fauna would imply that there are animals, but there's no evidence that there are animals or even remotely related to animals. Another event would be in the Triassic. You have
like he's basically denying that there is any animals there. Just no animals.
So Bechly plays a weird little game, or played, I guess, where Bechly would deny that anything was an animal, except for until such time that it was impossible for him to deny it, and then he said, "So what? It doesn't matter."
Yeah.
So, for instance, if you look at
heads I win, tails you lose. Mm-hmm.
Correct. Yes. So if something's absolutely like a Cnidarian, like Hautia or Aurora Lumina, he would just go "Oh, I don't care. It's just a Cnidarian." Okay, well, here's a bilaterian. Shows him Eulingia, and he goes, "I don't care. It's not directly ancestral or anything." Well, here's Kimberella. I don't care. It's everything is just I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. There's all these different animals, but he didn't care, because RJ has this term, this phrase. He calls it the no cousins rule, where basically creationists can't allow anything to be related to anything else, because if you do allow things to be related, you have to ask very uncomfortable questions about their relatedness, like who was their common ancestor, what did that look like, when did that live, and they're not doing that. They're not getting there. So if you talk about the Cnidarians in the Cambrian, and you say, hey, there are also Cnidarians in the Ediacaran, they just kind of shrug at you. They're like, I don't care. Just some jellyfish, although in the case of Hautia, it was a Staurozoan. So, although I think, Aurora Lumina is considered a stem, Medusazoan or something. But anyway, so not allowed to think about it. Anyway, we can keep
several abrupt appearances, for example. All great major groups of tetrapods, that would be vertebrates living on land, walking on four legs, appear abruptly in a relatively short window of time in the Triassic between 251 and 240 million years ago. That would be the first dinosaurs.
Did he say all the major groups of tetrapods appeared in the Triassic?
Yep. That's what
Is that what he
said.
just said?
Maybe he means theropods.
Well, he said dinosaurs, so maybe he meant reptiles, which would still be wrong. But he said tetrapods just then.
He did.
Fascinating. Because that's just not true, even slightly. Tetrapods appeared in the Devonian period, or stem tetrapods appeared in the Devonian period.
But Jackson, the dinosaurs are a subgroup of tetrapods, so it's.
Oh my God, you're doing the. So Nestle. So I was writing about Long Story Short in Rocks 2. I was writing a little info box on him because I realized we hadn't really talked about him that much because we published volume 1 literally a month before or right as we were starting to do our back and forths with Long Story Short. For reference, here's the deep lore for anyone who's wondering. No, sorry, we didn't do it first. He put out a couple of videos. He put out a video on homology and then a video on transitional fossils in which he talked about whale evolution and bird evolution. And so we responded to the homology video, and then he responded to us. We responded to him, back and forth, back and forth. I think we did we wrote 3, I think, responses to his homology stuff. And he ended up claiming that the platypus was a chimera, and then we had to explain that no, it's not a chimera. You're claiming these things that are superficially similar are actually similar. So he said, of course, the duck bill of the duck-billed platypus is actually a duck's bill. It's not. The morphology is completely different. The webbed feet of the platypus, again, completely different. If you look at a duck's feet, the toes of the duck go all the way to the end of the webbing. For the platypus, the front hands don't go all the way to the end of the webbing. The webbing goes way past the fingers. On the front feet, it goes to the fingers on the back feet.
I also believe they go underneath the nails, even like that.
It does,
nails,
yes.
Above, yeah.
Yeah, the nails sit on top of the padding.
Yeah.
They he mentions the electrolocation
and the underlying skeletal structure is completely different. Like you wouldn't be able.
He has a mammal foot.
Able to confuse the bones between these. Yeah, it's
right. Exactly. It has a mammal foot. Doesn't have a bird foot. And then he said, "Oh, the electrolocation is like that of fish. It's not. Fish use
it's
modified,
more similar to split glands. Yeah."
Yeah, so fish use this modified lateral line system for their mechanoreceptors, and their electroreceptors are built from the same system. But for the platypus, it's modified sweat glands, which fish don't have. They don't have sweat glands. So we pointed this out. We go through all this evidence that okay, these things are not actually similar. There are differences between them, and he just kind of responded to us, just kind of flipping us off with, well, you could say that about most homologies. He gave no examples. He didn't give us any examples. He just kind of said, well, you could do that for all of them.
It's imagined hypocrisy. So if you, basically it gets to call us hypocritical because for what reason? Non-stated.
Oh,
yeah.
I hear something. Someone's. Oh, never mind. It's gone
now. Nestle was getting electrified.
So what is the
still happening?
No, you're good now.
And so one of the other things that happened, so with regard to the whale one, so when we did 3 responses for the homology thing, and then for the whale one, we did a first response, I think, and then I think we did a 2-part response, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And because so what long story short does is he does this very, very sneaky thing where he says um he says he takes a quote from this book on paleontology and says that and he changes a couple of the words in it. The author says that the Coelurosaur, and this is a bit of an older book.
I actually believe that the quote was edited before LSS. Like I don't believe LSS himself did teach it. Like I have seen, like I know what you're referring to. Like the sentence was theropods in brackets all appear after
Archaeopteryx. Well, that's the quote that LSS had up, but the original quote was that the Coelurosaurs that are considered ancestral to Archaeopteryx appeared after, and so
but somebody else put that in brackets. Like
maybe
there was a person before LSS who changed it to theropods in brackets. Yeah.
Well, I mean, regardless of whoever changed it, it was dishonest.
It's still dishonest. Yeah.
Archaeopteryx appears in the fossil record about 150 million years ago. Theropods appeared about 230 million years ago, so like 80 million years prior. And so that whoever did it, if it wasn't LSS or somebody else, maybe it's Casey Luskin or Stephen Meyer or whoever, Gunter Bechly.
I highly doubt that LSS does the quote unquote research by himself. He just gets fed the material and he animates. I think that's all he does.
Yeah. But so that quote was up there, and we called him out on that. We said, "Hey, that's really dishonest," and he responded with, "Well, Coelurosaurs are a subgroup of theropods," and I said, "Theropods came after birds, therefore I'm correct," which is insane. That is an insane thing to claim. I think we compared it to. That's like saying that. It was something to do with Columbus. It was like
the first Europeans arrived in the 18th. What century was it again? The 16th century.
16th century. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
know. Imagine the like my quote. Imagine my quote of something was the first humans arrived in America during the 16th century, but the original quote says the first Europeans arrived, which is a different statement. Even though Europeans are a subset, that doesn't mean the two statements are equivalent. And LSS apparently doesn't get that.
Yeah, it was crazy. He really thought that you could just substitute Coelurosaurs for theropods, which, I mean, suggests that he doesn't know anything at all about theropod phylogeny, which I know sounds extremely elitist, but it's true. Like, he obviously doesn't know anything about this if he feels comfortable arguing that that Coelurosaurs are like the totality of theropods. Like, it's just crazy. He was dishonest. I eventually Nestle, you and Ration, I know, wrote another script, but I didn't. I was tired of arguing with LSS because the final video that he responded to us with skipped the first 14 minutes of our whale evolution response. Everything we said about Pakicetus and Ambulocetus, about whale evolution, he skipped it. He just jumped the whole thing. And that made me so mad. I was like, if you're not going to respond to this enormous part of our argument, then like, I'm done. I'm not arguing with you. I'm not putting the effort in to get ignored, basically. And he, because he did that, he would just kind of drop arguments. Like, there were a couple times where we would rebut something of his and he just wouldn't pick it back up.
And that's a common debate strategy. Like when you where you instead of responding to a critique, you just make the next argument. You don't even acknowledge the critique. You just go on and move on to the next argument, and without skipping a beat. That's I don't know exactly what it's called.
It's basically
I don't know if
I
there's a specific term for it, but yeah, I've seen it commonly happen. Like to just
I would just call it gish galloping, I guess. I don't know.
No, it's the gish galloping is something else.
Well, I mean, yeah, because
It's
usually gish galloping is like you
moving the
throw like 10
goalposts.
different. Kind of. I mean,
he also did that. Yeah, like he did it regarding the Tiktaalik point. Like his first argument was that Tiktaalik was dethroned because we found trackways of tetrapods before like older than Tiktaalik. But we pointed out that it's still a transitional, even if it wasn't directly ancestral to the tetrapod line. Basically, it could be a cousin, just like how the original paper portrayed it to be, like like Neil Sherban and also colleagues. They portrayed Tiktaalik as a sister group to the tetrapods. But of course, so we pointed this out to LSS, and LSS was basically like, well, Neil Sherban's prediction was flawed, basically. So he moved on to the next argument. He moved on to a new argument about Neil Sherban's prediction.
I'm currently in an email exchange with a guy who I said on someone's stream that there are papers where RNA has formed spontaneously, and he then emailed me and he said, I want to see that paper. So I showed him at least one of the papers, and then his criticism was, it didn't say where the source materials came from, so it was invalid. I mean, this is like telling me I don't know where cars come from, then taking you to a car factory, showing you the car that comes out at the end of the factory, and you complaining that it didn't explain how plastics were made or rubber. I mean,
it's just, I don't know what, I don't know. Maybe there's got to be a term for that sort of tactic.
Yes, moving the goalpost.
I think I remember. Like I was. It was on the tip of my tongue, but I think I remember it. Are you familiar with the channel
moving the goalpost
Innuendo Studios? Are you familiar with Innuendo Studios?
Yeah, I watch the stuff.
Like, okay, like what if I remember correctly, the video is called "Control the Conversation." That video describes the tactic I'm talking about. Like they instead of acknowledging the critique or responding to the critique, they just move on to the next argument. They don't even acknowledge the point being made against.
Yeah, but I do agree. They go further down. I mean, RJ is famous for saying this. Talk to a creationist, and eventually it will be just origins or bust. You don't know where the universe came from, therefore, I mean,
that is true. Yeah, that's why when Dapper and I do all of our conversations with creationists, we always like start off with like, all right, we're just going to assume that God created life, the Luca, and let's go from there. And like they always flounder because that's where they have to go. They don't know anything else.
Yes.
So yeah, they're
Well, my tactic is, if you want to propose that there is some being that created everything, before you can make the claim that it created anything, first show me that it exists. If you can do that, then we can talk about it. Otherwise, we have to rule that out. If it doesn't exist, it can't create anything. So that usually shuts them up.
Yeah. Okay. We can keep going.
Okay.
The first real mammal-like animals, the first relative to lizards, the first turtles, the first relatives of crocodiles.
Okay, let's pause for a second.
They appear.
So he said mammals, reptiles, turtles, crocodiles, right? Is that what he said? So a little funny story. When I wrote or co-wrote when I co-wrote the script for Professor Dave's video on Stephen Meyer, one of the videos that I watched to do that script was one where Meyer says we find the first mammals in the Eocene, which was hilarious to say. Which I am sure that it was a slip of the tongue. He just said it by accident, but nobody caught it. He didn't catch himself on it. I guess nobody proofed the video, so it just went out where he says the first mammals appeared in the Eocene, which is not any version of true. I got into an argument with Jonathan McClatchy on Twitter, and well, I did that very often. McClatchy would post something, and I would respond, or Dr. Dan would respond, and McClatchy would usually give us like one response and then disappear. He never wanted to argue with us.
Wasn't he the guy who also got in a public beef with PZ Myers a very, very long time ago? Or was it a different person?
Yes. Okay. Yes. McClatchy was the one who went to a Meyer talk and tried and was like, I brought this paper that says there are different like developmental pathways, or sorry, there are identical developmental pathways specified by different genes. And he brings it up. He's like, see, I have this paper right here. And PZ goes like, he's like, what organism? And the guy goes, fruit flies. And PZ's like, wait a second, I do fruit flies. What are you talking about? And then McClatchy like tries to back up, and he's like, okay, well, he tries to wriggle out of that claim, but it was too late, and he
it's
gets
like
really
it's
embarrassed.
like 15 years ago, I believe, or something like that.
Yeah, it was
I don't know.
very long time ago, but yeah, it was it was so funny. He tries to wriggle out of it, but it was too late. He PZ already got him. McClatchy he's done a number of debates, I think with Alex O'Connor on, they've done like, which is true, atheism or Christianity. But McClatchy, I believe his PhD is in evolutionary biology, I believe. And so it's really weird to me that here he is writing for the Discovery Institute, and yet you can never get him to argue about evolution. Like Dr. Dan and I are always, we would respond to him. I don't think he's on Twitter anymore. At least I haven't seen him in a long time. Oh, I'm so sorry. My unfinished thought for $2. Don't move goalposts. Like and share the stream. Very true. Thank you so much for $2. But McClatchy wouldn't, like, we would post responses to the stuff that he would post, and then he would put like one response and just vanish. I remember I posted something one time saying, it was right after or during the writing of that script or something. So as I'm writing it, I posted that like, oh, I can't believe Meyer's so dumb for saying this. And McClatchy responded to me and said, well, he meant crown mammals. And I responded with a paper, and I was like, you mean like the crown mammals that were present by the early Cretaceous? Whoosh. The sound of McClatchy disappearing.
Oof.
Sorry, so that's what it was. Sorry, it wasn't even crown mammals. It was crown placental mammal.
Yeah,
because Meyer said mammal, the first mammals, which we have crown mammals, I think by the Jurassic actually. But he said we have, but we went from mammals to, he actually meant crown placental mammals, one very particular group of mammals, which wasn't true either. There are crown placental mammals in the Cretaceous and in the Paleocene, so before the Eocene. So it was still wrong. It just very much the like.
Yeah, I believe there was like an old defunct taxon called the Candelard. It's basically a miscellaneous set of early ungulates and early carnivoran morphs, basically. And some of them were also present in the late Cretaceous, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, like things like Protungulatum are there in the late Cretaceous, and Purgatorius is like a primatomorph. Also, that paper you posted was really cool on Mixodectes, I think is what it was called. Wasn't it Mixodectes? Yeah. So Mixodectes is another primatomorph. So this is basically the group. So primatomorphs. So it's the group of mammals that's like it's like stem primates, or possibly stem colugos and primates together, which is really cool. Also, my unfinished journey for $2.22. Hail Nero, Jax, the Dutchman, and their tulip flower. Do you guys make flour out of tulips? It's in Holland.
No.
We did eat the bulbs in World War II. That's the closest I can get to it.
We actually, one of the garden at our the science museum just down the street from where I work at the aquarium, they have tulips in their out front, and they look very pretty, very beautiful red and yellows. Anyway, all right, we can keep going.
It's a nice thing we stole from, I think, Turkey it was, and we got famous for it.
Yes.
Suddenly out of thin air. There's even a book, a scientific book, mainstream scientific book, which deals with this Triassic explosion event, which is called Out of Thin Air. It's like the Cambrian explosion, but at a later era in the geologic. You have a sudden appearance of marine reptiles.
Okay, so he mentioned the other things. He said mammals didn't appear out of thin air. They're preceded by the therapsids, true mammals are preceded by cynodonts, which are preceded by therapsids, which are preceded by synapsids, which are preceded by earlier synapsids like the pelycosaurs. So like there's an enormous lineage going back like 300 million years of like mammals and their ancestors. This idea that they just came out of nowhere is crazy.
I've never seen like creationists like talking about the synapsids and therapsids from the Permian.
Oh, they don't.
The only thing the only person I've seen talking about them is Ramat, and he like completely bumfulled about talking about those things, and he doesn't even. Of course, he doesn't know what they are.
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. I mean, that's what RJ wrote his first book about, was Evolution Slam Dunk, is about how creationists just fail to deal with the reptile-mammal transition. Like, they don't even try. Bechly, funny enough, and we talked about this in the Professor Dave video, because Bechly wrote a series, like 8 blog posts in response to the first to the Meyer and the Bechly videos, or because he wrote, we did 2 Bechly videos. So he wrote these blog posts that talk about, he basically just agrees. He just kind of hand waves the whole reptile mammal transition. He just goes, yeah, that looks pretty Darwinian. There's not really a perfect, it's not completely perfect. There's like some little gaps here and there, but it looks pretty good overall. I mean, Bechly says that, like, so it's like, okay, so what's the problem? I don't even know. It's very weird. He mentioned turtles. Do what?
Yeah, but by the way, I think I got it right. So my unfinished journey was kind of sniped by AutoCarrot there. He didn't mean to type a flower in that way. And for all who don't know, the man who invented autocorrect has died. His funfair is next monkey.
Tragic.
Yes.
I
know it's mean, but it's also too funny not tell people.
Yeah, no, I just read that and I thought that was funny. That's what I was chuckling about. The turtles are another group where we actually have a really good fossil record for their ancestors. We have Unitosaurus, we have Papacellis, we have what's the one with the half shell? Nestle, what's the turtle that has the half shell? It has just the plastron.
Proganochelis? No, that's not.
No,
that's
not Proganochelis.
Odontochelis.
Odontochelis. There we go. Yeah, there's like Papacellis, Unitosaurus, Odontochelis. There's so many of. Hold on a second. I have. Oh, Peter, can you drop the screen for a second, please?
Now drop the screen.
So show me, please.
I can do that.
Hold on. I got Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters by Donald Prothero. I just have it right over here. Let me see. I know it's also, yeah, we just did crocodilians. There's like so many different groups of crocodilians. Like, what do you mean they came out of nowhere? That's ridiculous. I think I might have missed the turtles. I think I did. Snakes with legs. I sure did. I did miss the turtles. He didn't have a single picture for them, but I'll show it to you guys anyway. Odontochelis, this was, I think, discovered like right before the book came out. So that's turtle with the plastron.
I believe Odontochelis was like 2008, right, or something like that. Let's see here. When was Odontochelis?
Yeah, Unitosaurus. Yeah, I mentioned all those guys. So,
2008. I was right.
Yeah, then 2015, Papacellis was announced.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a link between like Unitosaurus and then later Odontochelis. Okay, you can go back to the video. But I was just showing that like the idea that these things came out of nowhere is ridiculous. Okay, we can keep going.
Well, you have a few comments still.
Oh, okay. Sorry. There we go. Let's see what I say. Auto collect. If taxonomy were invented today, we'd have heckin' chonkers and danger noodles. Very true. That is what we would have.
Oh, yeah, you missed one. You missed the one.
Yeah, I saw that one.
No, the one just above that from My Unfinished Journey. You haven't read that.
Not auto collect? No, I saw them. I saw what it said.
No.
Okay. All right, we can keep going.
No, I put it in the private chat here.
Yeah, I saw it.
About Dapper's head.
I put my papers on it.
About Dapper's head cannon.
Yes, I saw it. Yes.
Okay.
All right, we can keep going.
In the early Triassic, and what we mention in the book chapter is a study colleague of mine who has to remain anonymous because otherwise his career might be in risk. But he is a paleontologist interested in ichthyosaurs.
Why does he have to be anonymous? Because otherwise his career would be at risk. Is it because he's pushing pseudoscience or what, Jackson?
Most likely. Yeah, most likely. It's really funny to me how these guys always say stuff like, there's so many people who agree with me. They don't want to say their names. They go to a different school. You wouldn't know them.
Yeah.
Like, it's always that nonsense. In that whole back and forth that Professor Dave is having with Sabina Hassenfelder, she like has an email from a respected physicist or whatever who wishes to remain anonymous. It's like it looks like it's just her. It has the same exact like cadence of speech that she does. So I don't know. But it's usually that's how it is. It's like this these sound just like you guys. Like they're saying the exact same things you're saying, which I don't think is a coincidence. So all right, we can keep going.
And he told me when he first realized that the transition from terrestrial supposed ancestors of ichthyosaurs to these complete fish-like animals, which are then already appearing in Chinese layers just 4 million years after this great mass extinction event 251 million years ago at the transition from the Permian to the Triassic. There's only 4 million years to go from, let's say, a kind of lizard to a kind of fish-like viviparous marine organism with a dorsal fin and a tail fin and looking like a dolphin. And 4 million years is usually in textbooks the time span, lifespan of a single species. And there's a lot of reconstruction necessary to transform a terrestrial animal into a marine organism, similar story as in whales. And this colleague told me, even though he's not a theist at all, he's probably some kind of pantheist, not a Christian, even hostile to Christianity. But he told me that this immediately he realized that this cannot be explained with neo-Darwinian evolution. It's much too fast, and that is also one of the indirect evidences from the fossil record, is that the fossil record gives us very well established windows of time for the appearance of certain groups of organisms, for the origin of certain biological complex structures. And then we can use population genetic formula to calculate, is this window of time that is established by the fossil record sufficient for the necessary waiting times for the mutations to appear in a population?
So first of all, I do want to respond to the ichthyosaur thing. First of all, I don't. I'm willing to bet that he has a colleague who studies ichthyosaurs, who basically said like, okay, it seems like this group appears really quickly. There was hold on a second, I'm trying to find it. Yes. There was a paper that came out in 2023 that actually argues ichthyosaurs were present in the Permian, the end Permian. And I'll read that 1 second. But there's also, and we talked about this in the Professor Dave video, we talked about how there are already groups that we know of that have affinities with ichthyosaurs, but are themselves semi-aquatic or largely terrestrial. So, for instance, the ascleptosaurs are mostly terrestrial, right? They swam, but they're mostly terrestrial. Then there's also the Hupasuchians, which are more aquatic. They have more of these kind of seal-like fins. And then you have, of course, the more dolphin-like ichthyosaurs. And you have things like Cardarhynchus that are less derived than like any other ichthyosaur that we know of. So this guy definitely is like a more or I guess less well adapted at swimming than later ichthyosaurs are. So yeah, so it does seem though that like you have these semi-aquatic groups that are closely related to ichthyosaurs. But anyway, so this paper came out in 2023 titled Earliest Triassic Ichthyosaur Fossils Push Back Oceanic Reptile Origins by Benjamin P. Keir et al. So this paper says in the abstract, quote, reptiles first radiated into oceanic environments after the cataclysmic in-Permian mass extinction, so EPME, 251.9 million years ago. The geologically oldest fossils evincing this adaptive transition have been recovered from upper lower Triassic strata about 248.8 million years ago, and post-date a landmark turnover of amphibian-dominated to reptile-dominated marine ecosystems spanning the late Smithian crisis about 249.6 million years ago, less than 2.3 million years after the end Permian mass extinction. Here we report Ichthyopterygian, the group including fish-shaped ichthyosaurians, remains from the Arctic island of Spitsbergen that predate the late Smithian crisis in later, middle to early late Smithian deposits up to 250 million years ago. So unexpectedly, however, their large size and spongy internal bone structure indicate a fully pelagic Ichthyopterygian. So given this unambiguous occurrence approximately 2 million years after the end Permian mass extinction, these pioneering seagoing tetrapods can now be feasibly recast as mass extinction survivors instead of ecological successors within the earliest Mesozoic marine predator communities. So these guys were already there. They were already there, basically, when the Triassic starts, essentially. So it seems that ichthyosaurs actually... it seems that they survived from the end Permian into the Triassic, and then basically came to dominate in the marine communities. Vestafreya says, what do you think of a recent discovery what is thought to be a mosasaur egg? Okay. I think that's cool, if that's true. That's probably cool. I don't know if anyone's done more research on this early ichthyosaur fossil. It says it's cited by 14. A couple papers from last year. Emergence and ecological transition of the Mesozoic marine reptiles. So this is stuff I'll have to read because I'm not super familiar with all this. So anyway, okay, we can keep going.
Population of a reasonable size and to spread in this population, and what you find is that these times are orders of magnitude too short, and not in single cases, but in all cases that are interesting. Time is insufficient for Darwinian evolution to take place in the time that is available in the fossil record. So these explosive events, they are abundant. The origin of flowering plants, of angiosperms, was already known to Darwin as an abominable mystery, and it still is. The more we know, the more acute the problem becomes. The origin of placental mammals, they appear suddenly in the lower Tertiary, what is now called the Paleogene, about 62 to 49 million years ago. Basically, all orders of mammal appear more or less with the set of characters that is defining them now. So you have bats that look like modern bats with completely developed wings.
Oh, that's
and
false.
There is no precursor where you could see, let's
no modern bat still has claws on their wings.
Yep.
At least not like the what's the bat again called? The
Onychonicterus.
Yeah,
and Icaronicterus. So Onychonicterus actually doesn't even have the necessary larynx for echolocation. So Onychonicterus actually predates the bats attaining echolocation. What else he mentioned? Oh, he mentioned what was it? He mentioned the abominable mystery, as Darwin called it. That was really a reference for Darwin just to the origin of diapsids, not really flowers generally, but there are. Again, that's another paper we cite.
Sorry, what? The abdominal
the abominable mystery.
Abominable mystery.
Yeah, Darwin called the origin of. What did I say? I think I said diapsid.
I think you said diapsid by accident.
I said diapsid. That was not what I meant to say. Eudicots is what I meant to say. Eudicotylism. Completely different word. I was looking at. I guess my excuse is I was looking at this paper on ichthyosaurs that I'm scrolling through, eudicots, not diapsids. Darwin, I don't think that designation would even come around until way after he was dead. But so anyway, so eudicots. So Darwin applied that. Thank you for catching me on that. Darwin applied that term to the origin of eudicots because you have monocots, eudicots, you have magnoliids, and then you have what's called the anagrade, the basal angiosperms like Ostrobiales, Ambarella, Nymphea, all those guys. And so there has been for a long time a question of where flowering plants came from. And there have been some papers that show a series of like steps in terms of character acquisition for angiosperms. So there's like Bennetettales and Pentoxylales and Gigantoteriales and these other like stem angiosperms. I'm not super familiar with all those guys, but from the papers I've seen, that's kind of what the thinking is. So this paper doesn't have any figures. Not one figure. That's very frustrating. I'm gonna have to figure out another way to get this. Okay. He also mentioned the whole what do you call it? The mutation, the thing Bechly called the waiting time problem. Bechly, Behe, the thing that Behe calls like the waiting time problem, where he says, "Oh, we're doing this population genetic math." They're not. He's just lying. Basically, they're using assumptions for their population genetic math that are absurd. They absurd that no recombination happens. They assume that the population is haploid. They just make a series of absurd assumptions, and that's like they kind of have to, because if they don't, then it becomes very easy to like explain why their arguments are bogus. Okay. We can keep going.
Oops,
Peter?
I was muted. Yeah, you have a question. Investor Freya.
Is a very early mosasaur, so perhaps transition before they became fully. I'm not sure. I have not seen anything about it. I don't know about it. Sorry. Not sure.
Like a kind of tree through developing vestigial tiny wings and then growing larger over time. They just again appear out of thin air in the fossil record. The same modern birds, all the group of really modern birds, the so-called Neo-Aves, appear in the early Tertiary very abruptly, and you have orders like penguins about 61 million years ago. And there's another strange fact which shows that there has to be something wrong with the Darwinian picture. If you look at the estimates that are made with genetic data, so-called molecular clock estimates, there is a large contradiction between those genetic estimates and what we find in the fossil record, and these contradictions are so often found that
that's really not true. That's really not true.
It used to be true for for birds. It used to be true that our dates for the crown birds were in the Cretaceous, while we used to have only crown birds in the Cenozoic, but now we have Cretaceous crown birds, like Asteriornis.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this idea that like, oh, they just pop up out of nowhere. Like when he says that, I don't really know what he means. He's what he's doing is very disingenuous. He's essentially saying like, oh, well, we don't have like a direct species that's directly ancestral to these guys, so it's it doesn't count, right? Also, I'm looking at a paper that has a Peter, I'm going to send you a paper. Would you be able to put up something if I send it to you?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so they're in our private
to,
chat. Can you put up figure 2 from that paper I just sent you, please? What did you say, Nestle?
I would also like to draw attention to his usage of, like, explicitly stating the term crown group birds. So if you think about it, like, how can a crown group gradually emerge? How can it be? Like, of course, it
Right.
cannot be, because either it's the way it's defined. Either you're in the crown group or you're not. That's only a true dichotomy. So of course, a crown group will always suddenly emerge because there's no other option. That definitionally speaking, all it matters is if we have stem groups alongside or before or even after the crown group. And of course, regarding birds, we have lots and lots of stem groups like Archaeopteryx and Confuciusorniths, and also the Enantiornithines. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. What do you mean when you say they just pop up? They're predated the neognates of, or neoaves, whatever. I don't remember which it's neognates, right? That show up that undergo the radiation in the Paleocene, right? Isn't that the neognates?
Is that the one you wanted, Jackson?
Yeah, can you click on that picture, Peter, please?
Click on that picture.
You mean the group that includes the ducks and geese, or
it doesn't help much.
Neognates, right?
The Gallo and Sarians, right?
Well, Peter, if you go to the top left, there's click the picture again, please. And then top left.
Do you mean the Neoavians? Do you mean the Neoavians?
Okay, yeah.
No, the neognates, because it's paleognates is like the ratites, and then the neognates.
Yeah.
And so the neognates underwent a big radiation in the Paleocene, in the Paleogene, sorry if I remember correctly. And so when he says they just show up, that's ridiculous, because we're talking about birds in around 66 million years ago, when birds had already been around since 150 million years ago. So yeah, this idea that they just come out of nowhere, it's like, what are you talking about? Okay, so you mentioned ichthyosaurs. Peter, does that look like an evolutionary transitional sequence to you?
Very much does look like that. Yeah.
And he specifically mentions the fish-like ichthyosaurs, but the early ichthyosaurs were not very fish-like. They were like semi-aquatic, or at least do you know if Certorhynchus was still terrestrial? I'm not sure.
Maybe I think it was semi-aquatic from what I've seen. I believe it was
maybe still hopped onto land from occasion, like a seal. I've often seen art depictions depicting it as almost like a seal on land sometimes. Yeah.
So that's, then of course later on, there at the bottom, and you can see it is very not fish-like at all, right?
Yeah.
So that is definitely not fish-like. And then you have these progressively more fishy looking ichthyosaurs as time has gone on. Because look at that. If you look at this image, as you trace it up the right side, you see, okay, there's a bunch of not very fishy ichthyosaurs.
The tail is still straight. Like there's no how do you call it again? A hyperseal or a hyposealed tail?
You've got me on that one.
It depends. So does the tail bend upwards, like in sharks, or downward? Like in this case, the tail tip bends downward to form the fluke. At least in later members, the early members.
Are you talking about heterocircle and homocircle?
Oh yeah. I was referring to that. Yes.
Okay. But yeah, so if you look, it's really neither for the first
Yes.
For these first groups, it's neither homocircle nor heterocircle. It's just a tail.
Yeah.
And as time goes on, you get this progressively more heterocircle tail. and as time is going, and so it's like it didn't just come out of nowhere. You have later these fishier looking ichthyosaurs show up later in the fossil record than the less fishy ichthyosaurs. So I don't know what the problem is here. So thank you, Peter, for putting that up. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
But yeah, I wanted, because I was aware of, like, I know there were some papers that show that, and I wasn't going to let him get away with that one. So anyway, but yeah, so there's like, there are these semi-aquatic reptiles that were present in, if not in the early Triassic, that were present in the late Permian. So they were around, and then they had diversification in the Triassic as a result of the Permian Triassic mass extinction. So
yeah, like we have like lots of extinctions of the relatives to the ghost sharks, like the chimeras. Like the chimeras were really prevalent and dominant apex predators, if I'm not mistaken, during the Permian. But then, of course, most of them went extinct, and we only have the few chimeras still remaining with us.
Or like the mammal example too, when he says placental mammals just came out of nowhere. They're preceded by stem placental mammals, by other clades of crown mammals, because we have crown both metatherians and prototherians in the Cretaceous, and I believe there are stem prototherians in the, there are stem prototherians in the Jurassic, which means there are crown mammals in the Jurassic. So like, yeah, I don't know where he's getting these ideas. It just doesn't. It doesn't really.
Yeah. Also, if you look at like an early stem member of the placentals and an early stem member of the marsupials, the only difference is the teeth, like the number of teeth that they have. Basically, that's the only way that you can, or one of the only ways you can distinguish the two.
Yeah, and if you guys want to see, like, we go through the papers on like the metatherians, the like stem metatherians, the stem eutherians. We go through all that stuff. It's literally just the teeth. Like the teeth look, there's like a shelf on the molar on the back part, and that's what distinguishes the stem metatherians from the stem eutherians. Like it's not a lot, because teeth are one of the few things that survives because they're so tough, and so that's for the most part all you have to work with. So all right, anyway, we keep going.
Just occasional mistake. There's something generally wrong with this picture. So it's really interesting to compare the real evidence with the expectations of the theory.
The real evidence.
So you mentioned a few minutes ago the polyphyletic view of origins.
Right.
It sounds like you've come to that conclusion
view
through the evidence. Could you summarize for us why you think the case for common ancestry is weak and this alternative is better?
Well, actually, I wouldn't say it is weak. I think the case for common ancestry, if we take all evidence, biogeography, and vestigial organs, and so on together, it would be not really fair to say it's a weakly supported hypothesis. Actually, it's a quite elegant explanation for a lot of data. The question is it the best explanation if you take into account all the data? And my current view would be that these two alternative explanations would be generally on par in explaining all the evidence, common ancestry compared to a polyphyletic view of, let's say, progressive creation or something. But there is another killing argument, decisive argument, that is common ancestry only makes sense as an alternative explanation in the search for the best explanation of the data if there is a viable naturalistic transformation process that could explain the transition from ancestral species to descendant species, the origin of new body plans, of new complex phenotypical structures, of new genes, of new protein folds, and so on. And what research more and more shows, and especially research that is done in the intelligent design field, this kind of research where our opponents say it doesn't exist, but the time will come that it can no longer be ignored.
I'm holding it right here in my hand. All this
showing
evidence.
that this process, this neo-Darwinian process, is not viable, and
it's hurting
even
my arm.
a lot of mainstream theoretical biologists
I cannot show it to you because it's so heavy.
Evolutionary biology, they realize
it's so heavy, I cannot show it to you. I tried to lift it, but I just can't.
The origin of phenotypical complexity. I attended this conference of the Royal Society in November 2016 in London. And Gerd Müller, a famous evolutionary biologist from Austria, he made a keynote talk and showed a slide where he showed the explanatory deficits of the modern synthesis. And modern synthesis is just a synonym of neo-Darwinism. And he mentioned all these things that we...
So I am perfectly happy to concede that there are explanatory deficits in the 1930 version of evolution. Sure, we can all agree with that, I think. This is another tactic that creationists love to use, is they throw around a lot of terms that don't all mean the same thing. So they'll say they love referring to evolution, as in like the entire field of evolutionary biology, as Darwinism and neo-Darwinism. And they say, and evolution, they kind of use all these simultaneously or switching them out, but they don't all mean the same thing. In fact, they all mean different things. So the Darwinian
an argument. Oh, sorry.
You go ahead.
Like this is a bit niche, but an argument can be made that even the modern synthesis is not neo-Darwinism. Like there was a neo-Darwinism before the modern synthesis.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
go ahead.
The first, So, like very briefly, the you call the first instantiation of evolutionary theory, it was called Darwinism because it was from Charles Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace. This was natural selection and sexual selection, and we have no idea, and gradualism, right, and pangenesis, and we have no idea how traits are passed, but that's our best guess. And then you had so pangenesis involved, you have these Darwin thought that there was blending first. He had this idea of blending, that traits were blended. But there's an engineer named Fleming Jenkin who showed that mathematically this wouldn't work. The traits would all get averaged out. So Darwin was like, okay, well, maybe it's not blending. So you have pangenesis. So pangenesis is this idea that there are gemmules. There are these little molecules that come from each of your body systems, and they wind up in your germ cells, and then you pass those on. And so Darwin actually believed that a lot of the variations that are in organisms comes from the environment acting on these the gemmules and your gametes, right? So it's the environment that's creating diversity, which is what Lamarck argued years before. Darwin
didn't believe in he used transmutation. But he didn't really believe in mutation in the same concept that we believe in today, like, of course.
Right, because that wasn't developed until decades after he died.
Yeah, and mutationism was at first a competing competing theory to natural selection. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the mutationists and the neo-Darwinists, or whatever you want to call them, were duking it out in the early 1900s about what the actual mechanism of evolution even was. So yeah, you had these competing factions. But so anyway, so Darwin had pangenesis, this idea, this hypothesis, and it funny enough, so I was reading a paper not too long ago, because I was preparing a lecture for my biology class for my non-science majors, and I was reading a paper that argued that Darwin should still be considered the father of genetics, even though he was wrong about the mechanism by which genetic diversity is created. And the reason the paper argued is, yes, Mendel came up with the statistical analysis of how traits are passed on. That is true. But Darwin came up with a lot more ideas about genetics than that also turned out to be true than Mendel did. So like Mendel had this one idea that is all encompassing and true, whereas Darwin's mechanism was wrong, but he came up with a crapload of other ideas about genetics relating to like hybrid sterility, and relating to like what happens with when you cross hybrids, the distribution of traits that you get. Darwin actually independently came up with the concepts of dominant and recessive. He just didn't call them that. So like, and he also didn't know, of course, the degree to which these operated within organisms, and how they operate and all that sort of stuff. So this paper was arguing that really Darwin should be considered the father of genetics, which I honestly don't care either way, but I just thought it was kind of interesting. But so the neo-Darwinists were a group who followed Weissman, who argued that there were no gemmules that came from the soma, your body cells, your somatic cells, that ended up in the gametes. He argued that there was a barrier, which we call the Weissman barrier, between your somatic and your gametes. And so as a result of that, the people who accepted that became the neo-Darwinians.
Yes. So the neo-Darwinists, they dropped the pangenesis, and I also believe they dropped the sexual selection idea as well. Or am I mistaken in that?
I'm not sure. You might be right on that.
Okay, yeah. But they did accept the neo-Darwinists did accept natural selection from Darwin, of course. Yeah, that was the central idea that was carried on. And it was then later synthesized along with Mendelian inheritance and also mutation from the mutationist as well. So almost everybody was right in some way. It turns out,
right? Yeah,
like it's the same. Like it's like the blind man and the elephant, basically. Like everybody's
right.
is a bit right about something. The details, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's the issue was I guess every group kind of had its own like pet theory for how evolution happened. And it's like you're all, and as Nestle said, it's like you're all kind of right to varying degrees.
Yes.
But the work by R.A. Fisher and Sewell Wright and J.B.S. Haldane did affirm the primacy of natural and sexual selection and mutations being along with recombination being the generators of genetic diversity. And so they kind of worked that out. And then of course that was in the 1930s. And so over time, more aspects of evolution have been added. I wouldn't necessarily say mechanisms, but more aspects have been added, because now we have like neutral theory, and we have evo devo, and we have epigenetics, and there's been more work on like the rates of evolution, things like that. So the idea that like, oh, it's all just neo-Darwinism or just evolution, like, no, evolutionary theory encompasses all of these things. Neo-Darwinism was one version of evolution. Darwinism was a different version, but evolutionary theory just encompasses all of these together. So anyway, I know that's really kind of nitpicky, but I don't like hearing them throw these terms around when they do have different meanings. They don't all mean the same thing. So
it's just like referring to modern physics as Newtonian physics.
Yeah.
Or Newtonism.
Yeah, how dare you subscribe to Newtonism, So anyway, all right, we can keep going.
always told the origin of phenotypical complexity, the sudden abrupt appearance in the fossil record, and so on. It cannot be explained with neo-Darwinian evolution. And then, of course, those scientists, they don't want to give up naturalism, and they look for alternative theories. And there is this whole
really sounds
new
like you
field
just wanna
of the
spend-
so-called extended synthesis, where they look for new mechanisms like niche construction or phenotypical plasticity and so on. But all these alternative
pause for a second,
explanations
please.
have...
So, technically speaking, none of these are new mechanisms. So, I guess we kind of talk about what is a mechanism. So, when we're looking at evolution, evolution can be kind of, the process can be kind of stratified into different parts. You have the parts that, like, the area that is like the creation of genetic diversity. So that's like random assortment of like chromosomes during meiosis. Then you have recombination, of course, also during meiosis. You have mutations that are occurring. These are the means by which genetic diversity is created. And then, of course, you have your mechanisms of evolution, like you have genetic drift, you have gene flow, and you have natural and sexual selection. So the means of selection are, of course, they're selecting for particular phenotypes, whereas genetic drift and gene flow are not selecting for anything in particular. These are means by which the frequencies of alleles are changed through either populations coming into contact with one another or just random fluctuations within that population. But I don't know. I don't know if I describe phenotypic like plasticity as a mechanism of evolution, because I don't know. I don't know if I would. I mean, it really doesn't matter ultimately.
Like it does fit into the idea of genetic assimilation and accommodation. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how I would describe. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It's like whatever way you want to describe it, whether you want to call it a mechanism or not. Basically, what phenotypic plasticity is doing when you're referring to genetic assimilation is this process. You have a series of phenotypes that can be potentially realized based on your environment, right? So you have the genes that produce a certain range of phenotypes in particular environments. And so with genetic assimilation, the environment, natural selection, because again, like it comes back to natural selection, really, selects for particular phenotypes because those phenotypes are better at surviving in that environment. And so those phenotypes can become eventually encoded into your genes. And so instead of you potentially having a range of phenotypes, it gets whittled down to maybe just one or a few, and those are the ones that survive best in the environment. So that's still natural selection, right? And the means by which...
But yeah, it involves plasticity to accomplish it.
Yeah. So whether you call that a mechanism or not, it doesn't really matter to me. But the point is, the process of evolution is really still the same. All we've found since the modern synthesis of the 1930s is we found new ways of either generating diversity or new ways of spreading alleles through a population, right? But I don't know if I'd call that mechanisms per se, because the processes that already existed or that we were already aware of, like mutations of recombination creating diversity that then spreads via natural selection and sexual selection, like these were already sufficient to explain diversity, right? Or to explain a lot of diversity, right? Not all of diversity, but they were sufficient to explain a lot of it. And so I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know. It's just kind of weird the way that he's kind of describing it. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. How long do we still have in this video, Peter?
About 7 minutes. I was thinking.
Oh, we can kill it. All right, let's do it.
At this rate, so we can kill it. We've done half of what we had left. Just
Oh,
to let you
all right.
know.
Let's get to the rest. Let's do it. I'm sorry.
Deficits on their own. They either don't address the crucial problems, or if they address the crucial problems, they fail as miserably as neo-Darwinism, or they are ultimately based on neo-Darwinism, because to have phenotypical plasticity or things like so-called evolvability, they have to originate. These properties have to originate, and the only process that has ever been thought or conceived of how could there be a naturalistic way to create information in an iterative bottom-up process without infusion of information from outside is this idea of random variation combined with a kind of selection process. And if this process is demonstrated to be incapable to produce the effect, then basically game is over for naturalistic evolution and also for common ancestry. The point that we didn't make in the chapter, because I also only recently started to make up my mind, is that there is a certain fuzzy border between common ancestry and the polyphyletic view or special creation, which are often posed as if they are mutually exclusive binary alternatives. And I think it is important to distinguish individual descent in terms of parental relationships. So you have parents, mother and dad, and they had grandparents and grandparents and so on. And the question, if are there supra-individual ancestors, ancestral species that gave rise to descendant species? And what is implied in common ancestry is that the genetic makeup and the complete also epigenetic makeup of descendant species is basically inherited and modified from the ancestral species. And that, I think, can be falsified and will be more and more falsified with the research on issues like the waiting time problem, on protein folds, overlapping genes, and so on, orphan genes.
It's crazy that Bechly never publishes any of this work in like actual
doesn't
journals.
exclude the possibility that you still have this individual common descent. So my current position would be, I would call myself a special creationist or progressive creationist. I don't think that descendant species can descend by a naturalistic process from ancestral species. I think the information, the genetic and epigenetic makeup that distinguishes major new body plans or complex structures has to be infused from outside of the system by an intelligent agent. And let's be blunt and call this agent God. And but I wouldn't exclude or currently still favor that these organisms weren't created ex nihilo. Even the Bible doesn't say that man or animals or plants were created ex nihilo like the universe. But they were created from pre-existing matter. And this pre-existing matter could be either dead matter, like dirt on the ground, or it could be living matter. So I wouldn't exclude that all organisms, apart from the first living cell, had biological parents and in this sense had individual common ancestors. But I don't think that there is any reasonable way to get from a bacterium to a mammal by a transition from species giving rise to different species by an evolutionary process.
Here, pause for 1 second.
Interesting.
So he said a lot of stuff, and I'm very confused by some of what he said, because it both sounded like he was implying speciation as a process can't happen, and also that like he does think speciation happens because he's like, oh, well, it's the body plans that had to have novel information infused, but at which point you're talking about something completely different from species. Like he kind of kept waffling back and forth, which was very weird. I don't really understand. I didn't really understand that at all.
And like he uses the term body plan a very like loosely, like
Mhm.
not really defined. It just means something that looks different or too different to me to be related. Basically, that's like it's a gut feeling. And
It's the
like one
vibes, man.
example I can think of is like a while ago, Bechly put out a challenge to evolutionists, stating that we had whales evolving from terrestrial to fully aquatic within 5 million years
Mhm.
or so. And why don't we see anything similar happening in recent times? Like why don't we see anything happening like that in the last something in just in two species that are also closely related within 5 million years of each other? Like why don't we see the similar thing happening today? But then people try to answer that. Like one person, I forget who the person who was named, but it was on Peaceful Science Forum, and I think you are familiar with that forum as well. And somebody gave the example of the Hawaiian silver swords, which were like big radiations of basically sunflowers, but they don't look like sunflowers. They look like a completely different from the mainland sunflowers, and also the Hawaiian silver swords are also very diverse among themselves. But Beckley responds basically saying that they are basically the same body plan but different themes on the same body plan.
Which
So
you could
like,
also say of mammals.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Like and what about the phylum? Like whales are the same phylum as ours. So do we have the same body plan? Like it means nothing basically. It just means whatever he likes it to mean.
Right. Yeah. These terms they don't mean anything. Yeah.
So Jackson, I just checked. We did a little bit more than I said. We've got about 3 minutes left.
Yay! All right, let's do it. Let's kill it.
So you mentioned that you think that science will be able to test different elements of, did you call it super ancestry or common ancestry? What sort of experiments are you thinking about, and where do you see research going?
Yeah, maybe the first thing that I would mention is a research project that we started 1 year ago, and that is research on the so-called waiting time problem. So neo-Darwinian evolution is supposed to work by random mutation and natural selection. We know by empirical observation that certain innovation needs so-called coordinated mutations. That means you have two mutations that have to come together to have a selection effect, to have an advantage where selection can operate on.
Or the edge of evolution.
For example,
Yeah, basically he does the argument backwards. So what they do is they take a sequence and they say like, oh well, this sequence couldn't have been functional unless all of these mutations like arose, in a particular order, which like they don't know that, and the assumption that you have to go from like this sequence to this other one via a predetermined path is like, that's ridiculous. That's not how evolution works. So they end up coming up with this wacky argument where, again, they don't allow for recombination, they don't allow for genetic exchange between individuals. It's literally, they assume the population is, they assume it's like one haploid individual, like reproducing, and that's it. Because that was one of our responses to Long Story Short way back.
I remember that. Yeah,
was we went through the math on it, and we talked about how Behe was responded to by Michael Lynch, who is a population geneticist, and Lynch tried explaining this to Behe, God bless him.
What was it Lynch? I think it was like two other researchers, right?
I thought it was Michael Lynch. Was it not?
Michael Lynch also made a response to that.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if other people also tried explaining it to him. I'm sure a bunch of people did. But I remember...
But Behe was specifically responding to to I forget the names, but B was responding to let's see, what was the let's see,
I don't remember. It was so long ago.
problem paper, yeah. So 5 years or so, something like that.
It was like 5. It was
No,
5 years ago. We argued it. Long story
Yeah.
short. Good God.
I will look for the names, but in the meantime, you can continue.
Okay.
Malaria, Michael Behe could show that the resistance against chloroquine needed these
RJ actually
kind of
debunked that
combined
one
mutation
in
occurring
Evolution Slam
together,
Dunk.
and each mutation for itself has no selection effect. And then you can make calculations that we will test different showcases from the origin of photosynthesis to the origin of bird feathers. That will be actually our first showcase, the origin of feathers. To show that the windows of time in the fossil record are orders of magnitude too short to allow for these genetic changes to occur and spread in the population. It's not just sufficient that a single mutation occurs somewhere in the population. It has to occur several times because you have a phenomenon like genetic drift. It could just disappear because the lucky organism who had the first mutation could be eaten by a tiger the next moment, and then you need the mutation to occur another time because it has to be inherited and spread in the population. And there are formula and models, mathematical models, where you can make the calculation. So that I think is one very important field to test.
There are models.
Is there a viable mechanism?
The so-called models are just what he and Behe wrote. That's it. Or really just what Behe wrote years earlier. They just keep reusing the same argument over and over. It's like they don't understand the argument. My goodness. They just don't get it.
And if there is no viable mechanism, then this whole evolutionary story is dead in the water.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing with us about your chapter on the fossil record and universal common ancestry, Dr. Bechly.
It was a pleasure to me.
All right. Yay.
Whoop-de-doo. Yeah, cool.
It was Derwent and Smith, the authors of the paper that was specifically the focus of our interaction with Long Story Short.
Yes.
But at one point, to add to your point, at one point it was the point of contention that Behe made against Derwent and Smith was about the fact that just trying to remember exactly what the argument was. You had 2 mutations.
Mm-hmm.
The first mutation, you need 2 mutations to complete a beneficial phenotype. And the first mutation was making a 9 out of 10 incomplete regulatory site to be a complete 10 out of 10 complete regulatory site. But then Behe responded to even if you have the mutation, you still need to wait for the second mutation to complete the whole thing. And at the same time, you can have a different mutation that can make it an 8 out of 10 instead of a 9 out of 10 complete regulatory site. But of course, Dr. Smith pointed out that, as you mentioned, there's a whole population. There isn't just one individual with the 9 out of 10 complete binding site. There's a whole population which have the 9 out of 10 complete binding site. And B just didn't understand it. That was it. He just didn't understand why it's relevant.
Right. And that is especially funny because we have within our own human lineage examples of novel binding sites originating. Most famous example, at least in my opinion, lactase persistence.
Mm-hmm.
The Europeans and the African pastoral groups that developed lactase persistence, both of these independently developed novel binding sites for the enzyme that allows it to keep producing lactase. So
it's like a region near the main promoter, right? That attracts transcription factors. And by having this additional binding site, that means that the gene is active for a longer period during your lifespan, basically.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And so, like, that's within humans. It's ridiculous to argue that binding sites can't originate. Like, that's
it's very different from what I've heard. That it's like I've mainly heard that it's a broken gene responsible for lactose and lactose persistence.
That's right. Was it?
Yeah.
It was the guy that I debated, Kevin Anderson, who he kept arguing that it was. And I wish I'd known this at the time. I did not know it then. I did very poorly in that debate, in my opinion. But at the time, I didn't really know about the example of lactase persistence. But his claim was that it was a gene that was broken.
Yeah. Or a broken regulator, or something. I don't know exactly.
A broken regulator, but no, it was a novel binding site that evolved because the transcription factors are looking for a certain little set of nucleotides, and just by chance, these a certain set mutated that allowed for the transcription factor to glom onto it. And so, like, you obviously, unless you're planning on arguing that, like, God created us separately from those earlier humans, you have to take the position that binding sites can, in fact, evolve, within species, right? So, there was another one that I think Dan brought up, the HIV, or the mutation that, like, prevents HIV from binding to people. That's as a result of the people who survived the bubonic plague, or their ancestors, like, allowed them to not be infected with HIV. Like, that thing also is another example of something.
CCR Delta 32 mutation, or the CCR5 Delta 32.
Something like that, yeah. But they're like that. That's another example of something that occurred within human timescales. And B, he was just like, oh, I don't really count that one. I don't count viruses and bacteria because they have such high population numbers, which is insane because he's Mr. Bacterial Flagellum argument. That's literally him. He's the guy for the bacterial flagellum. So
also the CCR5 Delta 32 mutation is in humans. That mutation occurred in us. Like okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. It's also very dumb. It's. I mean, end of the day, like, creationists of all stripes, whether it's intelligent design proponents or old Earth creationists arguing against evolution or young Earth creationists, like, they're really all the same at the end of the day. They're not. Intelligent design proponents are not more erudite or closer to or less, like, deceitful or whatever. They're all wrong. They all use deceit in their arguments. They're all bad.
And none of them come up with their own model. All they try to do is to discredit science, and that is literally all they do.
Yes, exactly right. And in fact, in the example of Gunter Bechly, he wrote in one of the blog responses to Professor Dave, he said, "We don't have to come up with our own model." Yes, you do.
Yes.
You can't worm your way out of that one. Well,
what do you mean I have to substantiate my BS?
Right. Yeah, I can argue against you, but I don't have to bring up anything myself. What's his name? William Dembski said something similar, because he got destroyed by like mathematicians and biologists over his specified complexity.
Mhm.
And he wrote this blog post that was like, I wish evolutionists would apply the same level of skepticism to their own stuff. Like, he got butthurt that he got eviscerated. So butt mad.
Also reminds me of I forgot what the guy's name was, but I remember Dr. Dan talking to somebody, and the discussion eventually went on to information. And Dr. Dan was like, "Oh, all right. So now we need to have a definition of information, or we need to establish a definition of information to continue the discussion." And the other guy, I forgot the name, was like, "No, we don't. We don't need to define it." Yeah.
Not surprising. I mean, every
Kevin or
debate.
something. I don't know.
I don't know.
Forgot the name.
Every debate that we've ever had with creationists, they don't define information. Like, that's just not a thing they do. Because, as I'm sure everyone who's watched, can attest, if a creationist defines information in such a way that we can test it, then we can test it and we can show that they're wrong. If they argue that, well, by information I mean nucleotide content. Okay, here's an organism that has increased its number of nucleotides. Oh, I don't mean that. I mean number of genes. Okay, here's an increased number of genes. I don't mean that. I mean something else. It's like a round and round.
I found it. It's Paul Price. Dr. Dan talked to Paul
Oh
Price.
God,
yeah.
Paul Price. Yeah.
I think when was it again? It was it was like all the way in September 2023. All right, 2023.
Going back even further. So,
Okay,
speaking about Dr. Dan recently did a video with Arn on his channel, and they debunked. So, do you remember? What was his name? The guy with the huge headphones.
Nephilim Free.
Yes. Do you remember Nephilim Free and his videos of the walking?
The paper consuming guy. Yeah.
The Knesons, yes.
Yeah, he had these. Yeah. Yes, and they did a video by debunking that it's really not that. It's kind of a Disney animation of what happens in a cell. The first thing I thought, that's actually quite accurate, because there are still people who think that is a real video. Not an animation. It is a real video. I've met several creationists who think that is done with an electron microscope and then colored in somehow. I mean, I'm not kidding.
Yikes. Not surprising, but yikes.
Yeah.
Is he still alive, by the way? Does he still make videos?
Yes, he's no, he doesn't make videos anymore, but he likes to argue on Discord, which is a good reason to not go on Discord. Especially not the politics and religion and the politics Discord server.
I'd have no interest in ever interacting with Nephilim Free. I mean, our interactions were never mean or anything, but I just don't have any interest. There's no getting through to him, or
in all fairness, Jackson,
over 8 years ago.
in all fairness, if you haven't seen Nephilim Free argue with Darth Dawkins, you haven't lived. That was. Yeah.
I think I would. I think I would rather.
He starts to eat paper out of frustration.
Peter, I would rather destroy my eardrums than listen to Darth Dawkins and Nephilim Free arguing with each other.
I mean, as long as they are arguing to each other, it cancels things out a bit.
It cancels more brain cells. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I like seeing a young Earth creationist arguing against a flat Earth, because they finally they get a taste of their own medicine, basically.
But the thing is, Kent Hovind is not good with arguing. He's not smart, and so he can't. He doesn't understand anything in evolution. Oops. And so when he argues with flat earthers, he's not good at arguing against them either. It's like there are countless ways you could argue with a flat earther, but he just kind of goes, "You think that the earth is flat? Well, that's really dumb. That doesn't make any sense at all." It's like, that's not an argument, you dummy. You have to actually make an argument. Just calling them dumb is not an argument.
He doesn't know better. Like his
No, you're right.
rhetorical style is not doesn't change.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, he literally doesn't know anything about anything. It's So, anyway. Okay, so it is now 9:00. My time. I don't. You guys are time traveling heathens.
I one more
Go ahead,
thing.
Peter.
I'm
Okay.
No, that doesn't work anymore. Let me see. I can do this in a different way. Okay, so I'm trying to
What are we doing?
copy things from one computer to another, and apparently that doesn't work. Okay.
Okay.
There we go. Okay. So for people who hate Nephilim Free but still want to have a laugh, I'm putting the link to the music video, Nephilim Free, the musical, or whatever you want to call it.
Oh no!
Behind Crude Lies. I mean, if you haven't seen that and you know Nephilim Free, this is a fantastic video. It's made by a guy called Truth Surge, and I think he should get some kind of, award for this. It's one of the best videos I've seen about a creationist ever. Period. So,
oh my goodness.
Make sure
All right.
you watch that.
Yes, please go watch that video. Well, thank you everybody in the live chat for watching today, and thank you Neslik and Peter for being here, joining me for the show.
Always a pleasure.
And we will see all of you next time. So bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hang on a second. Have you ever seen that music video, Jackson? Oh, it is fantastic. It has Nephilim Free showering with his headphones on. Guy who plays Nephilim Free does a stellar job, though, and he really looks like him. That is, if you haven't seen that, you need to watch that. It is coming. So, yes, no, it's good you mention it, because what I would need from you, I don't know how many clips I'm going to get into it, because I want to use the same intro music that you had on your current one, so that translates over a little bit. So can you list me